A 6-year-old girl missing, a ransom note that was written inside the house, and an investigation that has caught the interest of the public for over 2 decades. JonBenet Ramsey, a child beauty pageant star, is the center of one of the most famous unsolved true crime cases in American history. As often happens in life, we are left with more questions surrounding what happened to JonBenet than we are given answers. My name is Travis Moody, and this is The Perfect Murder, JonBenet Ramsey. On the night of December 25th, 1996, John and Patsy Ramsey were attending a white Christmas party at a family friend's house with their children JonBenet, who was 6 at the time, and Burke, who was 9. According to John and Patsy, the family left to go home around 5 or 6 p.m. When the family got home, John reports putting JonBenet to bed at an unknown time, and Patsy reports checking on JonBenet in her bed at approximately 10 p.m. Patsy then went to bed, followed by John, quote, probably just a few minutes later, end quote. This is allegedly the last time that JonBenet was seen alive. The next morning, Patsy Ramsey woke up prior to 6 a.m. to find a ransom note on the stairs demanding $118,000 for the return of JonBenet. Although the note warned the Ramsey family not to involve the police, Patsy immediately called authorities. Oddly enough, the note was written with a Sharpie and a piece of paper from inside the Ramsey house. John had also just received a Christmas bonus of just over $118,000, the exact amount in the ransom note. The police reported no signs of forced entry and conducted a search of the house, neglecting the basement, to find nothing. Police searched the house from 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. and found nothing. They asked John to search the house to see if anything was out of place. John immediately went to the basement and found JonBenet's body. Later, during the autopsy, the cause of her death was ruled as, quote, asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma, end quote, and her death was ruled a homicide. JonBenet had suffered a fracture to her skull, been strangled with a garrote made from one of Patsy's paintbrushes, and showed evidence of being sexually assaulted. Perhaps the biggest blunder in this case was John carrying his daughter upstairs, disturbing the crime scene. To this day, despite multiple false confessions and almost 25 years of investigation, JonBenet's killer has yet to be identified. There are many potential suspects that have been accused of the death of JonBenet. Some people point to Patsy, suggesting she killed her daughter in her rage related to pageantry, as Patsy was an ex-pageant girl herself. Could she have been jealous of her daughter? Other people think John may have had a hand in her death, though John and Patsy are usually paired together as suspects. Some think Burke may have accidentally hit her in the head too hard while they were playing, prompting the family to cover up the murder. Others suggest that perhaps an intruder really did break into the Ramsey home and take JonBenet's life. Many people are unsatisfied with JonBenet's killer still being unfound, so they have turned to websites such as Websleuths.com to try and find answers to this case. Websleuths is an internet forum site where internet detectives can gather, communicate, and coalesce what they know about real-world crime cases to drive themselves closer to solving a case. Web sleuthing is something that takes a lot of time and devotion. These people are passionate about the case, and I want to focus on one subforum on this website in particular: separating fact from fiction. The focus of this subforum allows internet detectives to come together and determine what is known to be true and what is still speculation. As the creator of the thread JL says in the first post, quote, now that we know Web Sleuths attracts such a distinguished readership, I think it would be good to have a thread which will provide students of the case with a summary of facts which are not actually facts. Please note, not fact means we do not know with absolute certainty that it is a fact. Some people may believe it to be fact, but that is their opinion only. I use this thread to focus on 2 driving questions. 1. Are there instances of conflict in understanding of fact and not fact? If so, what attitudes do interlocutors take when discussing these discrepancies? And if not, are there general attitudes of concession for those whose facts are determined as not facts? And question 2, in what ways do the interlocutors on Websleuths.com seem to take personal interest in the case of JonBenet Ramsey? I believe it is important to note that at the start of this thread there is an attempt to gatekeep information on the thread. JBR Mod 2 writes, we can start another thread for discussions and objections. Luckily for me, this gatekeeping attempt was not successful. Though there were many trends of disagreements that I noticed throughout this subforum, I want to focus on 2 specifically. The first is hedging language. We use hedging language all the time when we say things like, I really don't understand what you're saying, or it kind of hurt my feelings when you said that. It acts as a way to soften the blow to our listeners. Often, when users would raise disagreements with another user, they would direct the understanding of the fact they are using back to themselves. We can see different examples here. When users say things like, IMO, or in my opinion, the only people who will be cleared in the Ramsey case are those with cast iron alibis. All my posts are generally JMHO, just my honest opinion. IMO, because the accident occurred during a confrontation between family members, just my opinion. If guilty, I wouldn't go to the basement for anything. In my opinion, a guilty conscience and a clean mind bent on cover-up would not allow a person to go anywhere near the body until it was found by someone else. And why wouldn't you check her room first? The detective told him to see if her things, clothes and toys, were missing, and he goes to a hidden basement storage room first? That, to me, is suspicious. Because of the nature of web sleuthing, the interlocutors may be trying to be polite in order to maintain good relationships with each other. After all, this is a tight-knit community trying to find the killer of a 6-year-old girl. However, not everyone is polite. Some users, such as BBB167893, who many users consistently refer to as Super Dave, tend to completely disregard table manners. Super Dave is often blunt, rude, condescending, sarcastic, and generally uncaring of social graces. We see several instances where he interacts with others in this way. When someone tells him they found a very interesting site that they think he'll find enlightening, he simply replies, I'm familiar with it. Here, when someone states that they have a lot of reading to do to catch up with the case, Dave replies, you have no idea. Alternatively, on this side, when Dave responds to multiple instances in the same quote, he asks, what's that got to do with anything? And rather than ignoring information that he doesn't know, he feels the need to clarify that he has no idea the answer to their question. As it turns out, Super Dave is the author of an unreleased book about JonBenet Ramsey. Because of this, he seems to be in competition with other users. He wants to know more than them. Not only that, but he shows a desire to have dominance in the knowledge field of the case. Super Dave obviously isn't representative of all or even most web sleuths, but it does highlight different personalities that are at play. Among users who share personal information about themselves, there is a common thread of wanting justice for JonBenet, sometimes paired with the desire for punishment for the killer. We see instances such as, oh, they'll pay. One way or another, hell awaits. No reservations needed. All pedophiles are welcome. Furious. It is just so darn sad to see a murdered child not be able to get justice. That may sound weird to some folks, but I guess you have to be a grandparent to understand. My world would come to an end if any of my babies died for any reason, but if they were murdered in this fashion, I would fight to the death to find out who did it and see that they paid. I think people can get lost in this case, but certain truths remain. Namely, that a little girl died unnecessarily via the sick and twisted actions of a sick and twisted perpetrator. And finally, God bless the little JonBenet, for she was the victim of a sick bastard. Whether it be from the United States justice system or divine intervention, it appears that several users on this thread are seeking some sort of punishment for the killer. Because the Ramseys themselves are suspects, it's hard to say that this is closure for the family. However, many users of the Separating Fact from Fiction subforum seem to want justice for the sake of JonBenet herself. While it is hard to say if JonBenet will ever get that justice, it doesn't stop internet detectives from trying to find the truth. We see that this act of web sleuthing has built a strong community among internet detectives that most people try to preserve. We also see the community getting closer as they share personal stories and goals, specifically as it relates to the JonBenet Ramsey case. Perhaps the real coming together is not with the case of JonBenet Ramsey, but with the relationships of those seeking her justice. The case of JonBenet will remain the perfect murder, one that has stumped a nation for over 2 decades, and one that will remain unsolved.